All right, hello out there. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can anybody hear me? All the lights are lighting up, so I assume somebody can hear me, but we'll find out when I get a response. So meanwhile, I can just watch the little bars go up and down. Me, 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 me. All right. That's enough of that. Let's see what's going on. Okay. Okay. $113.5. The Dow's up a bit. Everybody's green. That's not bad. All right, people can hear me. So now we're going to do this screen test. And when you can see me, I can move forward, I think. All right, so what else is going on? The VIX is super high. Silver is still under 19, 18.95. I like that long. That's a good long to play. And Apple, interesting. Okay, good stuff. All right, so people can see me, people can hear me. It's time to do a webinar. Yay. Okay, so let's see. Is it 1 o'clock? Oh, it's 1 o'clock. Let's start off. Oh, hang on. Oh, I did not. Oh, shake my tea. Okay, here we go. All right, now I'm ready. It's good when I'm ready too. That makes it a whole thing. All right, let's see what oil did today. That's old, September 30th. That was last week. Last week we had a big draw. We had minus 1.4, minus 4.7, minus 3.4. That's 7, 8, 9, almost 10 million barrels of a draw last week. And last week Biden had released 6 million barrels from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So basically 1 million barrels a day has been coming out of the SPR. And nonetheless, we had a 10 million barrel draw. So that was a demand thing last week. And oil prices did well. Today, not so good. But last week, so what's today, the 12th? So on the 5th, we had that report for oil that said that there was a 10 million barrel draw, and look what happened. We went from 86 to 93. Now, also, you know, we had the OPEC nonsense too, and whatever. But in other words, the last week started off with a big draw in oil on the EIA report, and then we had the OPEC thing, and all we did in the big picture is get back to 94, not even 94. So do daily. So in other words, you know, we had been from March until July or June, we had been flirting in the 100s and up to 120. And then that kind of, you know, once we hit July 4th, it always drops off. It's usually July 4th is basically the height of the prices for the year. So this was unusual anyway. But since then, it's been a complete disaster for OPEC, because this is not what they planned at all. They don't understand why it's dropping off like this. They can't control it. It's a huge problem for them. They almost can't function at this price. Like they can no longer function at $80. Below $80, they're just not making enough money to run their countries. And Putin's just made a complete disaster out of everything. See, what happened is you're always going to cause demand destruction when you raise the price of oil and gasoline, because you know, a person who is driving the average of 15,000 miles a year, and let's say he has a car that was getting let's say 27 miles a gallon. So he's using 550 gallons a year, which is 10 gallons a week, basically, of gas, right? So when the price of gas goes from a 250 to 350, it's costing this guy $10 a week. And it doesn't seem like much, but the difference is that they're paying, when they buy they're buying $10 worth of gas each week, and they were paying $25, and now they're paying $35 or $40 for the gas. That's very impactful to people. It makes them think about a lot of stuff. And when they go to buy a new car, they're more likely to make a decision that I want to get a more fuel efficient car. Now, in the past, the decision to get a more fuel efficient car was taking people from 25 gallons, from let's say 20 miles per gallon of gas that they would get to 20 to 30, let's say 25, 30. Okay, that was their choice. So, the consumption difference to OPEC would be this person would consume 20% less gas in their new car. So if they made the same trips and did the same things, they would use 20% less gas. But now you have people who are making the decision to switch to electric cars or hybrid cars that get 50 miles a gallon. And so now every time you force that decision by a person buying a car, which is, by the way, in America, a million cars a month, and globally, millions of cars every month, are not making a decision to go from 20 to 25 gallons. They're making a decision to go from 25 miles per gallon that they were getting to 50 miles per gallon, or zero or infinity miles per gallon, that they don't buy gas anymore at all. So when you're causing the demand destruction, when you go through a cycle like this of 6 months, and the people buying cars during the 6-month period of time, and I'm going to say global auto sales have got to be global auto sales, 60 million a year. I don't know how many cars are sold globally. 78 million a year. Okay, so 78 divided by 12, 6.5 million cars a month. All right, so we go back here. See, this is where the webinar is a good thing to do, right? Because it's like these are good things to discuss, and you couldn't possibly do them in text, because you can flip back and forth like this, and you can see that I'm not pulling these numbers out of my ass. We're actually figuring them out. So there's a lag, of course, but let's say in the month of April and May and June and July, all right, the people buying cars here, so that's April, May, June, July. So that's 4 months. So times 4, 26 million cars are sold while gas prices are over $100. Not gas, while oil prices are over $100. So 26 million cars are sold. Let's say 1 out of 5 people choose to get a more efficient car, to get something drastically more efficient. I'm not talking about a little more efficient. I'm talking about people who decide, I'm going to get a hybrid, I'm going to get a Tesla, I'm going to get whatever, because I'm sick of this crap. All right. So if it's 20%, it's 5 million cars. So now you got 5 million cars who were using 10 gallons a week. Is 50, well, it's 50 times a million. All right, 50 million. So you can see where this is already a pretty big freaking problem for OPEC, right? 50 million barrels a week less global demand just from the people you pissed off in this little period of time. Demand destruction has become a major problem for OPEC. They have massively miscalculated the effect because it's never been like this before. There's never been an alternative to stop using oil. You know, in the 1978 oil crisis, I had a Chrysler Cordoba, and you could only buy gas on odd and even days. Whatever your plates were, you could only get if your plate was odd or your plate was even, you could only get gas on that day. So it was rationing at the time, and gas had gone from, when I started driving, it was 65 cents a gallon. So I didn't care that my car got 11 miles a gallon. It was cool. It had leather interior, Corinthian leather interior, and a huge engine, and it was a son of a bitch huge thing. Like, it was a really big, nice car to drive. It was fun, but not so fun when gas prices went to like $1.50 a gallon. All of a sudden, I was a little bit pissed off about the fact that I had to fill up my car 2 times a week. But anyway, so like I said, you got 5 million cars using 10 million barrels a week. Is 50 million. It's saving 10 million barrels a week. It's 50 million less barrels a week. That is a significant drop in consumption. And not all of them go to electric. Some of them go to just a hybrid or something like that. And maybe it's not so drastic. Maybe it's 30 million barrels a week. But it doesn't matter if it's 10 or 20 or 30. Any of those numbers are insane. And that's why you see OPEC dropping their production 2 million barrels a day, because we're not freaking using it. They destroyed the demand, and it's not coming back. It doesn't matter how much more those people drive, it is not going to help OPEC anymore. They've lost the customer forever. That's a big, big deal. So, you know, the concept of demand destruction has always been with us, but when the demand destruction is, oh, maybe a couple of people carpool, or maybe this or maybe that, that's not a big deal. That does not going to really hurt OPEC the way this does. This is saying, I'm no longer going to use your product ever again. Because good luck getting people who have electric cars, and I talk to them all the time because I take Ubers a lot, and Ubers are, maybe it's just down here in Florida, but Ubers are like, I get picked up by a Tesla 1 out of 3 times now. And they're mostly the 3s. And people say to me all the time, because I ask them, I'm always curious. People love them, think they're great cars. They have absolutely no problems with their range. So they're telling me this on their passenger. I'm asking questions, of course, but you know they're telling their friends this too, right? I have no problem charging up. I don't even think about range, or it's never an issue. And these guys who drive for a living. They're like, I drive all day long and I just plug it in at home, or if I feel like it, I go to a fast charger place and the guy shows me on his map, because Tesla, you just punch a thing on your keyboard, on your dashboard, and it shows you all the fast chargers that are not that exist, that are available right now for you to go charge. And the map is just littered with fast chargers. And that goes for other electrics too, though, because I've seen people with the other electric cars. They have apps that do it, but same thing. There's plenty of charging. It's never a thought. They're all aware of, like, oh, Wawa is going to start. Every single Wawa is going to have electric now. This mall is going to have an electric parking lot. Blah blah blah. They know all the places. It's just a thing. And they pay for it. They pay like $20 to charge up, but they're not paying $50. And they're not using any oil at all. This is a massive miscalculation that OPEC has done, because every time, this is going to happen every time they do this now, whenever they raise oil prices, they are taking away demand as fast as they raise their prices. That's never happened before. You know, somebody going from a car that gets 25 miles a gallon to 35 miles a gallon is using a bit less oil, but not like this. This is, people are cutting their oil in half or completely off. And you are not going to get these people to switch back and start using oil no matter how low you make the price. Then you couple that with the incentives that we have to buy electric cars. And that's another thing, policy shifts, because now they're forcing politicians to enact laws that will benefit the electric car industry, the solar industry, so on and so forth, because unreliable supply. Look at Putin. And by the way, I'm not entirely sure that we America or somebody on our side didn't blow up that Russian pipeline like they say, because, you know, again, it's something where you force a policy, because if Putin is going to supply natural gas over the Nord Stream pipeline, then Europe has it as a crutch. It's like taking a pacifier away from a baby, right? Then that's a fallback plan Europe has. They're like, well, we could always use Putin's natural gas until the war is over, and then we'll go back to using it like a friendly way, whatever, you know. But we'll deal with him for now. But now you've taken away the choice. Now somebody blew up Nord Stream, and now you have to move away from Putin. You can't use his gas. It's no longer an option. And again, demand destruction. So what's happening? More LNG lines. Also, what you're doing is forcing Putin now to spend money on LNG tankers and LNG ships. And he has no reason to do that. He had no reason to do that if he had a pipeline that would go directly from Russia to Europe. And now he doesn't have a pipeline. He's got to start building tankers that can move the stuff. And then once the war is over, and once he tries to reestablish the pipeline, those tankers are still going to be there, and they're going to get used by other people and also diminish his ability to supply. So again, demand destruction, huge unintended consequences, but in a way that you can see where the math is just entirely in your favor. Just like, you know, it's something they should have realized. And I've talked about this for years, that we are slowly creeping away from the kind of use of oil that we've had. But what they've done is they forced decisions in a way that had not been done in a long time. Look how oil was. Let's go back even further. Okay, so the last time oil was $100 was 2015. Oil fell back into a very different range after 2015. All right. And what happened during this time? This was Obama had a lot of policies pushing people to move towards higher mileage cars and so on and so forth. So we were pushing away from that, and it started taking effect, and it became a glut. And and America drilling also opened up very much. There was a lot more drilling in the U.S. We became as large of a producer of oil as Saudi Arabia. That also hurt them a lot. So we ended up with a glut of oil. Oh, and the fracking. This is where, this was really the dawn of fracking was around here too. That was a big thing. So I added a couple of million barrels of oil. That's all it takes. A couple of million extra barrels of oil, and all of a sudden it's too much oil. Because again, you're not putting that many more cars on the road, and even worse, oh, and the EPA standards. That was the other thing. Not the EPA, the CAFE standards, CAFE. The rules for the miles per gallon of automobiles changed. Let's do that one. That's another huge change that's been ongoing. CAFE standards, images, timeline. There we go. Okay, so apparently this was done a while ago. I don't think it's that different now. Yeah, let's try that. What is that? What that does? Nope, that didn't help. Okay, so here we are, la-di-da-di-da. the standards for cars were supposed to be 25 miles per gallon, but it takes a long time for somebody to switch over their cars. You have to wait till all the used cars get turned over and you start getting a fleet average of this. But they're saying this is what your new cars should sell for in your fleet. What happened between 2010 and 2016 is the requirement went from 25 to 35, 37, whatever the number is. That's what happened under Obama. Trump came in, he didn't really change this, and the rules are going to be in 2025, basically, are going to be 50 miles a gallon or more than 50 miles a gallon, or 54.5 miles per gallon. The Obama administration, blah, blah, blah. So they all came up with, it's going to be 55 miles a gallon. Now, Trump tried to say we're not going to do that anymore, but the reality is it's already done in Europe. It's already done in Asia. So for the US automakers not to be up to that standard, they won't be able to sell their cars around the world. Nobody's going to want them. Who's going to want the 30 mile per gallon cars in Europe when every other car gets 50 and 60? It's not realistic to be in there. So drastic changes and drastic demand destruction. And again, let's say, you know, 100, let's say 30, 40 million gallons of 30 or 40 million barrels of oil that are consumed out of 100 million are being used by cars, passenger cars. So let's say it's like 30, let's say 35 million barrels, okay? So 35 million barrels a day are being used by passenger cars, and we're getting 25 miles per gallon. Oh, times 25. Times. So 35 million barrels times 25 million barrels. So basically a billion miles a day that people are driving, 875. So now if we divide that by 50 miles per gallon, it's 17.5. It's well, obviously it's half. It's half. So if you flip the fleet from here to here, you're cutting out 50% of the consumption of fuel. And we are doing that over the course of 15 years. We're in this process. That means every year, 1 million barrels less fuel is being consumed by autos. Every single year. But what happened when you do what OPEC just did, when you make the fuel, when you make the low fuel consumption or electric cars more desirable to the motorists during a time that they're flipping. And don't forget, 26 million cars flipped during the time that they were over $100 a barrel. You're pushing that timeline faster forward. You know, people don't expect the entire fleet to flip over all at once, but what you do here is you accelerate people's choices. All other things being equal, when gas is $4 or $5 a gallon on your way to the car dealership, it weighs heavily on your mind. And you will make a different decision at the sticker, and every different decision that gets made is demand destruction for OPEC. So that's what went wrong, and that's what's wrong with oil prices now. They had to cut their production because they simply there's not enough demand. They destroyed the demand and it's gone. It's not because, you know, and you hear these people talking on TV, it's not because of the recession, it's not because of this or that, it's because they overcharged and people said, screw that, I'm not using your product anymore. You know, it's like movies. There's another good example, right? Movie tickets. Movie tickets are like $20 now. Not even IMAX. Like regular movie tickets are $20 now. Cost $100 for 4 people to go to the movies, or a father takes family to the movies, and then it cost another $50 for a popcorn. You know, for 4 people to have popcorn and Coke is $50. they killed the market. Baseball did that years ago, right? Same thing. Once a seat is $100 a seat, and it's costing you $500 to go to the frickin' ballpark, what do you think happened to attendance? I'll stay home and watch the game and keep my $500. I used to say that to my kids. I'm like, you want to go to the ball game? You want $100? What do you want to do? All of a sudden they're like, oh no, well, we'll take $100. You know, you put the decision down to them and say, here you go. This is how much I got to spend to take you to the park. You know, not once in a while, like, hey, if it was my idea, yeah. But they liked it, and they would like be every week. They go, how about we go to a ball game? How about we do this stuff? I'm like, do you know what this stuff costs? But anyway, back to OPEC. So they screwed up. This is the result of them screwing up, and it's not coming back. And nobody talks about this because, again, it's complicated. You know, when you watch CNBC, even when you watch me on CNBC, I've got 8 minutes tops. And these guys, actually, CNBC doesn't even give you 8 minutes. But you know, they'll give you like 8 minutes tops to talk about your topic. And they don't want to talk about one thing for 8 minutes. They want to talk about like 3 things in the 8-minute segment. So they tell you before the interview, we're going to ask you about this, we're going to ask you about that, and we're going to ask you about that. You got about 3 minutes for each topic, 2 minutes maybe, and then a follow-up question. So 2 minutes for each topic, and a follow-up question. And you can't talk about this in 2 minutes. This is complicated. You can't even talk about it in 8 minutes. We've been talking. There's been the topic so far. It's a half hour. And we're not even really done with it, but it does, you know, I'm assuming you guys will get the concept, so I'm going to move on from here. But this was just me explaining why oil is down. Oil is down because they fucked up. Their strategy was a huge mistake. All right, so this still says September 30th. And it still says September 30th. This is not right. The frickin' the holiday. I bet there's no oil report today because of Columbus Day. Oh, how BS is that? So there was no reason. So we weren't actually waiting for the oil report this whole time. There's not going to be an oil report as far as I can tell. Oh, that's annoying. Weekly. Petroleum status report. La 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 la. October 3rd. EIA Petroleum status report. Brent crude spot price. Release date October 5th. Next release date October 13th. Not today. There you go. Anyway, so all that was for nothing. No, that was really important to talk about, though. And that is why, now we can finally get to it. That's why this is happening. They didn't fix anything. All they did was adjust the supply to rationally meet the forward demand, and it's not coming back. And it's not because the people are in a recession. It's not because of a slow economy. It's because people don't have those cars anymore. And by the way, they do have those cars. Somebody probably is buying a used car, blah, blah, blah. So that's another reason, unfortunately, it takes so long. We don't destroy the cars that have bad gas mileage. We should, but we don't. You know, you should literally, the government, this is a place the government should be stepping in. Any car that gets less than 20 miles a gallon should be destroyed. There's no place for it, okay? There really isn't. Any car, and that goes for pollution too. I mean, I don't know if it's a peer pressure thing or if it's a legal thing, but the kind of cars they have down here, blowing smoke out the tailpipe in Florida, and having a cloud of black crap behind them, and not only that, and the noisy cars too, the ones that make like huge, the ones that sound like full throttle motorcycles. There's a lot of them down here, and there's barely any up in the north. You know, up in New York, New Jersey, it's like not a thing. I don't understand why. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what's going on down here, but I can't believe how many cars there are that like you look at them like, how did that thing pass an inspection? It doesn't make any sense. So I don't know what's up with that. but they seem to allow a lot more crap here. But the government should basically be taking cars like that off the road. You know, they would make a huge difference. It really would. It's like you're just not allowed. You can't. I'm sorry, folks. You're not allowed to drive a car. Cars can be modified. Okay. You know, we have a '68 Mustang and we love it, and we only drive it 3-4 times a year. It's not like a big deal. But if I seriously drove it, you know, I would get a modified engine probably. You can get an electric engine put in the thing. It'd be kind of cool, actually. So anyway, so the main thing is it's the speed of the demand destruction that has caught OPEC off guard and ruined their plans. And if they do it again, they'll cause it again. Because the choice is now there. That was not true in the past. In the past, you couldn't say, okay, I'm not going to buy gas anymore. I'm done. I'm going to spend $5,000 more bucks to buy. I'm going to spend $5,000 more bucks at the dealer to buy my car, which isn't that much because I'm going to have a lease that's going to be $400 a month instead of $350 a month. So if I get if my lease is $400 a month instead of $350 a month, I can easily justify that because I won't have to buy gas anymore. End of story. So people are going to make those decisions very, very quickly. Plus, I get $7,500 back on my electric car. That's nice too. So when you force a policy change that hands out $7,500 for people buying an electric car, and you make it a palatable decision for them, then all of a sudden you're taking a person who used to be a perfectly good customer of yours and bought, what did we say it was? 500. Somebody who used to buy 500 gallons of gas a year, and you're taking them down to zero. So 500 a guy who's getting 30 miles a gallon, assume, even if somebody's getting 30 miles a gallon, and they drove 15,000 miles, that's 500 gallons a year, right? And that's 500 gallons is what, 10 barrels, 12 barrels of oil. It's about 12 barrels of oil a year. You're taking that person who's buying zero. You flipped him off completely. He's gone. He's not a customer anymore. Just like people who don't go to baseball games, just like people who don't go to movies, they're gone. And by the way, that's what the movies have done too, which I just said that. But you know, what do the movies do? The movies charge. You know, I've got 2 kids, and they like to go to the movies. And instead, I buy a popcorn machine, and I buy an 80-inch television for $3,000. And you know what? It pays for itself in 1 year of not going to the movies. Like, hey kids, you know, we'll sit home and put an 80-inch thing on. I got the Disney Channel, which you got to have anyway, and we'll watch movies at home. Or you do an on demand for $10 or whatever it costs for on demand. You lost the customer. You charge too much, you lose the customer, and that's the ultimate control on inflation as well. So now we're going to get to like the broader economic picture. This is what happens in an inflationary cycle. The companies can't just charge whatever they want. And this is, I don't know if you guys remember, I was talking about this like a month ago. The CEO of Pepsi was on TV, and I wrote about it this morning too. The CEO of Pepsi was on TV, and he was talking about shrinkage. That was the topic of conversation. And he was saying, he says, look, because the guy asked him about shrinking packages, shrinking what's in the package and charging the same. And the guy was super honest about it, very straightforward. He goes, yeah, we do that. He says, of course we do that. He goes, it's a bag of Cheetos. It's got 25 Cheetos in it, and it costs, $2. He goes, so now the Cheetos that we put in the bag cost 10% more. So I either have to charge you $2.20 for the bag of Cheetos to have the same profit margin. I have to charge you either $2.20, or I have to take 10% of the Cheetos out of the bag, or I have to give you 22 Cheetos instead of 25 Cheetos. He goes, we have to experiment. He goes, sometimes we do more, sometimes we do less, sometimes we put a supersized bag of 30 Cheetos and charge $2.50, and people think that's real, people think that's fair. He goes, we try everything until we figure out what the consumer is happy with and what we're happy with as far as our profit margins. He said it's straight out, very factual, explained exactly what they do. They experiment until they figure out on the push and pull of inflation where they're going to be with their consumers. Because you have to be, because ultimately, in the end, you have to sell your Cheetos. Otherwise, what do? You made a huge mistake. You have to maintain the market share of your Cheetos. You have to maintain them as a desirable product. So a smart company like Pepsi, and I at the time I said, these guys are doing exactly what they should be doing, and boom, look what happened. They're already turning everything around inflation-wise because their new pricing models work. Why? Because they experimented on them constantly to figure out what people want. There's a fact. I can no longer charge you $2 for 25 Cheeto chips. That's no longer possible. So let us figure out together what's a fair combination of how many chips you're going to buy for how much money. Is it the $2, or is it the number of chips that you care about? If you don't care about, if I take 3 chips out of the bag and you don't care, and you still pay $2 for Cheetos, that's great. Now, then you read online though, shrinkage, blah, blah, blah. It's a choice. And some manufacturers make the right choice, some manufacturers make the wrong choice. OPEC just made the wrong choice. Movie theaters charging over $20 for a regular movie ticket have made the wrong choice. They have customers who are no longer going to those movie theaters. And the minute they go home and buy that 80-inch screen, you've lost them. They're not coming back. And that goes for a lot of things. People make different choices. They stop doing things. Habits change. And you have the companies have to get on top of those cycles before they lose their people. So we'll see what else. That's what we learned from earnings is who was able to keep their customers and who can't handle it and who's lost control of their narrative with inflation. And we got to watch that with every company we hold and every company we think about buying. How well are they navigating this changing environment? But the bottom line is there's permanent changes being made. There are changes in habit being made. People used to eat things that were habitual because they were for economic and availability reasons. They were things that you would eat all the time. I'm sure your parents tell you stories about stuff they used to eat. My folks used to eat eel pie in England. That was like a thing. but at the time, they thought that was great. Lobster used to be this incredibly exclusive thing that people. Well, actually, first of all, lobster was garbage food at one time. Then it changed to exclusive food, and now it's back to being like heavily available. Shrimp too. It changes with the times, and what they do is that the chefs will include the stuff in food, and they'll then decide it's in fashion, out of fashion, whatever. But what do they try to push? They try to push things that are inexpensive for the restaurants and freely available, and then mothers are chefs too. Like if they're buying for their family, they're picking things that are realistically priced. So with beef, you have people switching to pork now. People are switching away from beef into pork and things like that because steaks have gotten a bit too expensive at this point, and people are changing their habits. Now, do you get them back? You'll always get me back with a cheap steak, but it's not. Actually, you won't. That's not true. Actually, I've gone the other way though. I'm like, I won't eat a beef. I won't eat a steak pretty much unless it's like basically Kobe. I have no interest in eating regular steaks because I got used to like eating Kobe steaks, and I'm not like a big snob. I don't eat them all the time. Once or twice a month, No, at least twice a month. At least twice a month, I will have a Kobe steak. And generally they're going to be, well, I get them delivered. I cook them myself because I won't go to a restaurant and pay $100 for it usually. But I get them delivered for like $50 and I'm very happy. And they're small, but it's like it tastes better to me. And you know what? I have no desire to have a regular steak. In fact, I just had a regular steak last week, and I was just like, ugh, and it was a good place. I just can't take them anymore. I'm like, this sucks compared to the steaks I make at home. I think I told you guys that, right? Crowd Cow. That's where I buy my steaks. So so once a month I get the steaks. I put them in the freezer, and a couple of times a month I pull one out of the freezer, defrost it, cook it. End of story. That satisfies my entire desire for steak for the month. I'm so much better off now because I used to have steak more often and I never really enjoyed it. But this Crowd Cow thing I freaking love. It's like I get a Kobe steak, I eat that, I'm like, I'm good. And every time I'm in a restaurant, I sit down, steak's on the menu, and I'm just like, nah, like it's gonna suck. I know it's gonna suck. So it's been healthier for me to do it this way. But that's what it is. It's demand destruction, right? And now steaks, and frankly, steaks have caught up to the price of Kobe at this point. They're insane. They're charging like $20 a pound for a steak these days in the supermarket. Nothing like Kobe, but you know what I mean. It's just not worth it. It's like, if I go to a restaurant, the steak I had at the restaurant was $60. And arguably it was a good steak, but I just was like, I would much rather than have this 16-ounce porterhouse steak, I would much rather have a 5-ounce Kobe steak. It made me much happier. What was I gonna say? So yeah, so as we see earnings, some companies are going to be on top of things, some aren't. But the bottom line is, and that goes for all of our portfolio companies, is ultimately most companies, because we've been through inflation cycles many times during our lives, right? We all know that stuff we used to buy when we were kids was like 1/10 the price it is now. If you're like, if you're 50 or older. I mean, literally, that's the rate of inflation. It's like been up. It's up. Well, that's actually, if in 50 years, 2% a year is up 1,000. Is up how's that work? Anyway, compounds. So it's like it's up things. You're not surprised things are up 10 times from where they used to be. I used to get a pack of M&Ms for 6 cents. Now it's like $2. I can't even believe that. Conceptually, it blows my mind. I was like, how can it be $2 for a pack of M&Ms? 40 times more than I used to pay. What the? I'd love to sit there and analyze what actually happened. And one of the things that happens, though, is the Mars Corporation makes much more money than they used to. They didn't used to make that kind of money. That's true also. A lot more money goes to the bottom line of these companies. Companies make more money now than they ever made last quarter. And that, by the way, is another reason I'm pro investing right now. The GDP report that just came out last week or the week before, whenever it came out, record corporate profits. The most corporate profits ever recorded just happened. Where's the recession? And when you have an inflation, yes, there's going to be missteps because first the prices go up, the input costs go up to the corporations, and we just had the PMI report, the manufacturing input cost report. And we just had that report this morning, and it said, yes, it was 0.4% more than they thought. They thought it would be down to 0.3. Not a big deal, really, though. But input costs are still up there. But shipping costs are coming down rapidly. And that's your first sign that things are going to change. What was I? Oh, Baltic. BDI? Oh, shit. No, BDI. Baltic Dry Index. Yes, still got it. Well, not quite as that's all right, that's short term, that's longer term. So the shipping index has come down from last year, insane, 5650. It was 4,000 or 3,500 in the middle of the year. Now it's 2,000 and it's hitting resistance here. It bounced back, but it's hitting resistance and it's going to cycle back down to a more normal level, which is right around here, under two, like probably around 1,500 to 1,000 range. It's probably where it should be normally. And that's a big frickin' difference. You know, the container cost, because, you know, we have this hemp project in Thailand, and it doesn't pay, even though you can grow hemp cheaper in Thailand, it doesn't pay because of the shipping, or didn't pay, maybe it will now. It did not pay at this price to ship it, because then it becomes more expensive than the US. And that's because hemp is bulky and it takes up the container, and the cost of the container was more than the cost of the hemp that was inside it. You know, I'm talking about industrial bulk hemp, you know, for fiber and things like that. So even though we could produce it much more cheaply than the US, it didn't make sense to ship it from Thailand across the Pacific, because then the container cost and the shipping cost would make it more expensive than a locally grown US product. It doesn't translate. If we can get shipping costs down around 1,000, yeah, then it'll work out. But it only works out for as long as it does. And this is how, again, you end up with shortages and things. It's not necessarily, you know, you don't necessarily have a shortage of rice, let's say rice. You don't necessarily have a shortage of rice because there's not enough rice in the world. You have a shortage of rice because this is where rice can profitably be shipped, and it's usually fine. It's usually much lower than that. So rice is shipped in vast quantities from Asia to America. But all of a sudden, when it gets up here, they can't make the money selling rice. And it's the same problem. If you sell the rice for the price that includes this kind of container cost, you then have people who say, no, thank you, I'm not going to buy the rice. And now you've paid a fortune to import all this rice that nobody wants to pay for that price. That's what happened to the retailers who had to adjust their inventories, right? Because what they were doing in the early part of the crisis last year, they were accepting the more and more expensive shipments of things like patio furniture or whatever that was coming in from Asia, and the shipping costs and the material cost and everything was creeping up and up and up. And when it hit the ground, the consumer said, I don't want that. And that's what freaked out all the retailers earlier this year, because you know, people like Target are like, what do you mean? You wanted 87.6 per month last year. That's, you know, we track this shit every day. We have computer models that tell us exactly how many of these you want, and we order them for exactly to track it. And you know, they can't even understand the concept of this because it's been so long since we've had inflation. It's decades since we've had real inflation. And the people who run these models and the people who came up with these great inventory control systems just had no clue of how to deal with it. So what happened? All the retailers got stuck with massive amounts of inventory they couldn't sell because people had said, no, I don't want that patio chair anymore, even though I loved it last year. This year, I want that patio chair that's cheaper. And they're like, well, we didn't buy enough of those because nobody wanted those last year. And they're like, well, last year I had money. This year I don't have money. I now want a different product. And that goes for shampoo, and that goes for toilet paper, and that goes for paper towels, and that goes for dishes and cups and things. Everything that you buy, you make a different decision. That's what's difficult for corporations. That's what's difficult for even the best run corporations, to keep track of what's happening. And so first they get the push of prices. Then they have to see if they can pass those prices on to the consumer. If they fail to pass those prices on to the consumer, they have to change their product mix. And then again, the situation is fluid because the inflation goes up and down, and then the Fed starts raising rates, and that causes additional chaos. People get raises, and that changes their buying habits again. It's a period of economic turmoil, and that's why it's difficult to invest during an inflationary time. It's very transitional for both the companies and the consumers. And for the wholesalers and the shippers and the manufacturers, everybody's got to come back to an equilibrium. But you know what? The equilibrium they come back to is all going to be based on a higher price. So if you're Pepsi, you figure it out. You make your can a little smaller, or you change something in the drink, or you take 3 Cheetos out of the box, whatever you're doing. You find the mix that's going to sell, and people will end up buying the same products for more money. In the end, they'll buy the same products for basically more money. There will be an inflation of prices, like we've had our entire lives on everything we've ever bought. Comics. So comics is a great example. When I started collecting comics, they were 20 cents, and they had basically just gone up from 15 and 12 cents. I didn't quite catch that. I came in when they got to about 20 cents. And it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but I could imagine the people who paid 12 cents must have been like, 20 cents? What are you insane? That's not what a comic costs. It's 12 cents. And it makes a difference, right? Now, I collected them when they were 20 cents until they were 35, and that was the last straw for me. They were 20, then they went to 25, then they held 25 for a very, very long time. And I don't know, I must have been 12. I mean, I think I'm 11 or 12. I mean, I had my own money. I had my paper route, so I used to buy them with my own money. But they went from 25 cents to 30 cents, and then 30. So I had a couple of years of collecting comics, of reading comics and saving them. I had a couple of years of buying comics, and they were because I know in my box they were all basically 25 cents. They were 20 cents, 25 cents, 30 cents. When it hit 35, I was like, screw you people, I'm not buying these for 35 cents. And the thing is, they are now, I have to tell you, they gotta be at least like $3.50 now. They're like 10 times more money. And I can't even imagine how that's possible for kids. Because $3.50 is a lot of freaking money. It's not like giving me a quarter when I was a kid and saying, go buy a comic book. Like my dad would give me $1 and I'd buy 4 comics. You're not giving your kid $20 to buy 4 comics. That doesn't make any sense. It's not the same thing as a quarter. Giving a kid a $20 bill now is not the same as giving a kid a quarter back in 1970. That's not at all the way it was. So the inflation is outrageous. And what happened? The sale of comic books. I'll show you what happened. Well, maybe. Who knows? It's a tricky one. Let's see. Comic book sales over time. Well, Archie, it just fell out of fashion. Average. Why is everybody tracking Archie? Isn't that weird? What is this? North American comic sales over time. Oh, so they're up in volume. See, that's interesting. So it doesn't go far enough back. But anyway, this is talking about the dollar volume of comic book sales. So they, at $3.50, that's the equilibrium I'm talking about. So all right, that's a good example actually. So the comic book business charging $3.50, and this is why they do it, I guess, because they're making $2 billion. So Where is it? Why did I lose my calculator? Calculator. Nope, that's a calendar. Not a calculator at all. Calculator. So, wow, $2 billion. Isn't that crazy? There. So $2 billion divided by 350 is 500 million comics. All right. But 800 million divided by, I would say, probably $1 in 2012. There's only a recent thing that they've gone so insane. Well, obviously that's going to be 800 million. So let's say they sold 800 million comics here for $1, and now they're selling 500 million comics for $3.50. The company is printing less comics for more money. They're making, obviously, more money drops to their bottom line. Inflation is great for them. That's what they want. I'm sure this is being pushed by all the movies too. It's very helpful to them. So some companies benefit, and I wish I could see the number though. I'd love to see the number of comics actually sold. Walking Dead sales, DC trade revenue. See, this is all these things are about their they're talking. Oh, sales in units. Oh, but that's a short term. Damn it. I would love to see like a real study on this. It's funny, like there's not many things I would pay to see a report on, but I'm kind of curious about how this is overall. But I mean, I can tell you your total sales volume, comic sales to comic shops. Oh, sold by Diamond. I don't know what Diamond is, in millions of dollars. No, see, it's dollars again though. Damn it. And then nothing's going to go back as far as I want. But you know what I mean. So in other words, it used to be everybody I knew read, had comics. Now no kids I know read comics. It's not a thing anymore. Obviously somebody's reading them, but only 500 million total sales in America compared to, I guarantee you, a much larger number, probably billions were sold in the past because they were cheap. In fact, you think about it, when you were a kid, there used to be a comic rack in every in every magazine store, and well, not there were no magazine stores anymore, but there used to be a rack of comics. The first thing when you'd walk into these stores, it'd be like always a rack of comics. Even 7-Elevens used to have racks of comics when you walked in the store. Now they don't even have comics. It's not even a thing. It's just because it died out because they got too expensive for people to afford. But that didn't stop them now from making much more money than they've ever made before. So inflation is an adjustment period. But in the end, the companies will still sell their stuff. They'll probably sell the same or less stuff for higher prices, and then they make more money. If you sell less stuff for more money, unless your costs went up significantly, you're going to do okay. And companies figure that out. They figure out the equilibrium. Even Pepsi does it like a science. Other companies will do it in a herky-jerky manner, but eventually they all get to the same place, or mostly get to the same place. You don't get a lot of companies getting wiped out by inflation. Getting wiped out by inflation means you really don't know what you're doing, and generally by the time you've got a company that's public, they're not that incompetent. It's not likely they're so incompetent that something like inflation is going to throw them completely off their game. Oh, there's a good one. Oh, I love it. Fantastic Four sales. Estimated sales, and I don't know if that, I think that's probably units, but look at the poor Fantastic Four. So 1965, 300,000, and recently, what is this? This is 05, but look at the drop off, right? That's horrible. I don't know what that means. That's crazy. Something cool must have happened here. Must have one hell of an issue. But anyway, that's pretty much probably what all comics look like over this period of time that I'm talking about. Used to be lots and lots of people would read them, and as they got more and more expensive, it just fell and fell and fell. But you know what? They're making just as much money selling this many as they used to make selling that many. That's the difference. Ooh, the Fed thing is out too. All right, we can't get the EIA. Let's do the FOMC. Minutes. La la la. All right, September. Is that today? Is that the meeting we're talking about? Yes, it is. Press conference statement. Oh, the projection materials. I love projection materials. Oh, we saw that last time though, right? We're just looking at the HTML of this. Meanwhile, what's the market reaction? Yeah, improving a little bit. Okay, good. Well, let's see if anybody has anything to say before I barrel on. Bernie says, please list the NASDAQ and S&P resistance and support lines. And he agrees with me that the U.S. probably blew up that pipeline. Yeah, it makes sense. We benefit. We sell Europe the natural gas. We want them to commit 100% to buying our natural gas and not Russia's. We are the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. We have it for 100-year supply easily for the whole planet of natural gas. So all we have to do is have a good contract so that we can build more terminals and put more ships in the water, and we will be able to supply them. You know what? If you have, it's 3,000 miles across the sea to Europe, and probably not even that much. No, it's probably not. Ooh, good question. How far from New York to Munich? 4,000 miles. Oh, it's 3,000 miles across the sea. What do you know? Okay, so it's 3,000 miles across the sea to if you're going just to England or something. It's 4,000 in Germany, so it's 3,000-mile trip, let's say. So an LNG tanker is going to be 1,000 feet long. All right, so this is so you need so let's say we need to cover 3,000 miles times 5,280 divided by, that's how many feet, divided by 1,000 feet, 15,000 tankers. Not that they're going to be nose to nose, so 700 tankers, 500 tankers. So realistically, you need about probably 500 tankers to be an artificial pipeline. So at any given time, there's about 500 tankers going back and forth and shoveling and dropping off natural gas. So picking up natural gas here and dropping it off here, and you would have it would be as good as a pipeline. You probably don't need it to be as good as a pipeline though, because a pipeline can't compress natural gas like a ship can. Therefore, a ship can carry quite a large quantity of natural gas and so on. So, it's reasonable to replace a pipeline with ships. And that's what we're going to ultimately do. We're going to have just like oil. That's what oil does, right? There's no pipeline that takes oil from Saudi Arabia to here. We have a constant supply of ships carrying oil, and it's enough to supply everything that we need, or everything all the countries need. They go around the world. That's what's going to happen with natural gas. We're not there yet. We don't have the terminals. We have the pipelines that go to the terminal. Then the LNG terminal, then has machines that compress the natural gas, liquefy it, transfers it to a ship, and then the ship takes the the ball-shaped containers of compressed natural gas liquid and carries it across the sea, and then it's decompressed on the other side. You need the decompression. You need the decompression thing over there. You need the compression things over here. It's unfortunately unlike, this is where it gets expensive. Unfortunately, unlike most shipping, there's no round trip. Okay, so in other words, you know, they're not coming back with anything. There's nothing that you can put in those containers other than liquefied natural gas. So that's an added expense to the whole process. But that's why they're paying a fortune for natural gas, more so than we are. Because even if we compress it, ship it, and so on and so forth, it's a process. Still, if we arrange it long term and we do it properly, we can lower their natural gas prices and supply plenty of it and create a very boom market in America for natural gas supply. Although unlike the Saudis, it won't be shared with the common people. Not that they share much of it, but they share some of it. You know, it won't be shared with the common people. It's just going to make some people unbelievably wealthy, as tends to happen with everything. Oh, and Bernie wants to know about the support lines. The support lines have not changed. I mean, on the NASDAQ, you know, we were hoping 11,000 would hold. We're below 11,000. That's bad. And don't forget, this is a week. These are weeks. So we failed 11,000, and we failed. Well, we already knew it was bad when we failed the 200-day moving average, which is at 11,220. So 11,220 was critical to hold. And what's happening now is we're below here. This line, this 50-week moving average, which is the 200-day moving average, is coming down very quickly and sharply. And that means even if we begin to recover, we're not going to be able to stop this death cross from happening. This is going to happen. And in fact, what's funny is even if we get back over it, what's going to happen is we're going to lift the 200-week moving average into the 50-week moving average, and we're still going to have a death cross. There's no avoiding it. It's going to happen. We're going to death cross. We're probably going to death cross here, and that's within about 6 months. So even if we survive this and we recover, we're still 6 months away from the next catastrophe, which is the NASDAQ having a death cross. So this is going to be very ugly technically, and people are losing faith in the you know, if you're not going to recover here, and we're probably not going to make it back to here before this death crosses. Now the whole thing is now into a zone where we'll be lucky to get back over the strong bounce line, and then the death cross, and then we have a very good chance of testing 10,000 into next year. So if anything bad happens next year, we're going to be down at 10,000, and possibly, you know, really bad situation. It's been a long time. This is a weekly death cross. That would be really terrible. The only good thing. The only good thing is this is kind of oversold. This is kind of oversold. It does seem like we should be recovering a bit, and it's all up to earnings. So we got tech earnings coming out. As you know, there's only 10 or 20 companies that matter for the NASDAQ, and they're about to report. So if they report good earnings, we'll pop back a bit. If not, if they report bad earnings, nobody's in the mood for bad earnings, I can tell you that. So on the S&P, I really have the S&P up. Where is it? Default list. S&P, March 2022, May 2022. Is this going to be it? I guess. Oh, ugly, yeah. Now the S&P is daily. Now in this case, it's weird because here's your 200-day, here's your 50-day. The 50-day is diving below the 200-day, and that's ugly action. That's this kind of action right now. That's what we're getting now. This is what this was. And you do not want to have the, you know, we're in danger of this. It could all fall apart. You know, and again, my you know, getting oversold here, I don't think it's right. I think that all this is just a panic thing. And the reality is that the earnings are there to justify getting back to 4,000. But technically, no. And technicals, unfortunately, have a huge effect on what's going on. But if you can ride it out, this is just going to be a depressed time for the market, and it's a good time to accumulate stuff. So what does the Fed have to say? What's the market doing now? Now let's have, oh, yay. Okay, good. All right, so what does the Fed have to say for themselves? We were wrong. Could you imagine if they said that? We were wrong. No, but these are just some minutes, so we already had the meeting. Not only we already had the meeting, but the Fed has already said 14 speeches last week, and still this week, they're all saying, we are going to keep tightening. We will tighten until this inflation goes away. And today, there is no sign. Every time you get a report that says inflation hasn't gone away yet, it reinforces that they're going to be keeping at it. Keep in mind, this is from September 20th. So you have to also you have to think about like what's changed since September 20th. Not much, frankly, but financial market developments, intermeeting period, an upward revision in investors' outlook. Don't forget they killed us. This is on the 20th of September. September 20th was here. So they had their announcement, the market went down, and then we decided to go back up. But they killed the mood of the market when they put out that statement on the 20th. It was a death blow that we had just come down to the bottom. Oh wait, sorry. No, here's the 20th. I'm sorry. So here's the 20th. This is what the Fed did. When they came out with their statement, they knocked us all the way down into a new section, basically. They dropped this entire section, or almost two sections down. Segments, actually, would be the proper word. But they dropped us two segments down on the chart where we did not expect to go. And they knocked us down much harder than we thought. Now, but those are words more so than deeds. You have to keep that in mind. So what the hell were they thinking? So there was an upward revision in investors' outlook for the path of the policy rate. Treasury yields climbed substantially. Equity prices initially rose in the second quarter earnings that were better than feared, but later retraced those in response to the shifting policy outlook, because they had started with the war talk, anti-inflation. Regarding international developments, yields in most advanced also rose sharply. Central banks lifted policy rates and indicated in their communications they were likely to tighten policy, blah, blah, blah. The exchange value of the dollar appreciated noticeably, reaching multi-decade highs in real terms as market participants perceive the mounting economic challenges abroad. So where's that? Futures, dollars, dollar. Well, that's a little long term. Okay. So this has been happening since 21, but look at what's been happening this year. 96 to 114. That's 18. So that's about 20%, basically. We're up 20% for the year. The dollar is 20% stronger than it was at the beginning of the year. That's well, for one thing, if it wasn't for that, inflation would be way worse, because all the raw material, commodity costs, and so on and so forth that you're buying in dollars, you're buying with the stronger dollars. So it's actually keeping inflation down. You would not like to see inflation if this starts coming down. And the Fed sees that, and that's also what worries them, because they're like, if it wasn't for the dollar being this strong, we would have much worse inflation. So when the Fed looks at inflation and tells you it's bad, they're taking into account the fact that the dollar is mitigating what bad is. And they know that if they ease up on their policy and weaken the dollar before inflation is brought down, They're going to make things much, much worse. But they're trapped, and we're all trapped. We're all trapped by some terrible, terrible decisions that have been made over the last decade. We're trapped by the fact that we have $32 trillion worth of debt. We have a social security system that is going to be non-functional down the road. And by the way, the Republicans are their top of their agenda is to default on the Social Security. That's a huge thing they keep talking about. It's like how, oh, well, it's not really an obligation. We could cut that in half and save a lot of money. Yeah, you would. If you cut Social Security and Medicare is half of our total budget, like $3 trillion. So if you stop paying it, you'll have a ton of money. You solve all the budget problems by not paying Social Security and Medicare. That's what the Republicans are looking at as a solution. If they just cut that in half and tell you, okay, well, we're not turning off Social Security and Medicare, but we're adjusting it so it's now only half a payment of what it is. Could you imagine the crisis for seniors in this country and what that'll do to people? But you know what it does? It puts $1.5 trillion into the pocket of the Congress and the president that control it. And what they can do with that $1.5 trillion is cut taxes to the wealthy in half. They can give $500 billion more to the military, and they'd still have enough money to balance the budget. Wouldn't that be fun? So if you old people have to eat cat food, you know, whatever. It's insane. I mean, the whole strategy and concept is just beyond crazy. I talk to so many old people down here in Florida. They just can't make it. They're not gonna. They won't make it. Everybody's right on the edge. The market implied path of federal funds rate shifted sharply higher. Particularly Jackson Hole, incoming data indicating a more restrictive path. A policy-sensitive rate suggests a 75 basis point increase was widely expected to be decided by the committees. Some chance of 100. Now wait a minute. This is not fair. They started the rumors of a 100-point move. They were the ones that basically started all these rumors that they are now pointing to say, well, people expected it, so what are you going to do? They expected it because they were telling everyone that's what they were going to do. The market implied path suggested reasonable odds of a 75-point hike and a 50-point hike in November and December. Okay, so here we are. They did the 75-point hike. Will they only do 50 in November and December? People are not saying that now. People expect 75 at the next meeting. They generally slow a pace of race increases in December. Peak policy being reached in the first half of 2023, and I say 6% is where they're going to stop. Beyond that period, the path of Fed rate sloped downward. They think it's going to reverse. The median respondent of the committee expected the policy path to remain flat after a peak rate was reached. On average, death survey, 30% probability to a decline in real GDP over 2022, nearly double the probability assigned in July. So they downgraded their GDP. Now that is not necessarily true anymore because the Atlanta Fed has suddenly decided GDP now, unless they change their mind. Look at that. So for the last couple of weeks, the Fed has been drastically upping their expectations for GDP. They went from 0 for this is for Q3 GDP, right? Yeah, Q3. This is for Q3 GDP. They went from 0 to 3%. And again, this is what the Fed is saying. They're like, this economy is much better than you think. And we're not slowing it down, and we need to slow it down. They want it to be at 0. And see this blue chip? This is what I'm talking about. This is the mainstream media. This is the bullshit you're hearing constantly. These guys are still telling you doom and gloom, recession, blah, blah, blah. The Atlanta Fed is saying, no. The data we're getting is telling us that nothing is stopping. We're growing at 3%. 3% is historically high. We usually grow 2%. 3% is a lot. still causing inflation, still a lot of growth. So I pointed this out last week, and it's actually gotten more. They actually pushed it even higher now. So you have to take that into account. Since this report, they have rethought the concept of how much we're growing, and drastically. There's the September 20th Fed meeting. That's what these notes are based on. It's what they thought was happening, and they still raised rates. What the hell are they going to do now? Policy, all right, balance sheet runoff, that's boring, and money market, 75 rate, pass through, blah, blah, blah. The staff anticipated take up decline, manager pro tem, this is all boring stuff, housekeeping. Staff review of economic, okay. Information available in the September 21st suggested that GDP was increasing at a modest pace after having declined in the first half of the year. Labor demand was strong, still strong, right? Still, it went from 11.2 to 10.5 in recently. Open jobs. Labor market very tight. There's 160 million people in the workforce, and we have 3.5% unemployment. So it's 5.6 million. There's 5.6 million people who are in the labor force looking for a job. That's what unemployment is. But that, and we have 10 million jobs. So there's 5 million jobs too many, but that's not real, because 2% unemployment is normal. There's 1 out of 50 people at any given time are between jobs, right? You are between jobs 1 out of 50 years, right? Or 1 out of 50, let's say 1 out of 50 quarters. Let's say 1 out of 50 quarters of your life. So once every 10 years, you are between jobs. That's normal. That's the bottom of that's a normal labor force. It's not possible for nobody to be unemployed. People switch jobs, people move on, people get different positions, people leave one company for another. That happens. Companies do close and have layoffs. You're never going to have 0% unemployment. Anytime you get down to 2, you're essentially at full employment. We're at 3.5, so it's not that there's 5 million people who are unemployed. There's really there should be 3 million. There's probably 5 million. So 2 million people would 2 million people in the labor force would probably like to get a job, but there's 10.5 million open jobs. There's no possible way that we can fill those open jobs. And I talked about this last Friday when we had the non-farm payroll report. There are ways to do it. You could bring in 2 million immigrants to help out. You could also my best idea for fixing it would be to provide more daycare, so that women who are forced to stay home because of having to take care of their children would have the option to go out and get jobs. And that would be millions and millions of people you could mobilize quickly. These are educated, skilled people who used to have jobs or could easily have jobs, who just have to be stay-at-home mothers for economic reasons, because we do not provide the kind of services that European countries do for their citizens. So if you want to fix the labor force problem, instead of crashing the economy, how about improving the economy and making it possible for women who have children to be able to afford to go back to work? And all, I forget, I did this Friday. I'm not going to get into it, but it's ridiculous. It's a really, really sick thing we do as a society. Pisses me off. Non-farm payroll employment posted robust gains in July and August at an average pace that was only slightly below what had been seen. The unemployment rate edged up from 3.6 to 3.7. The unemployment rate for African Americans decreased, while the rate for Hispanics moved up slightly. Both rates noticeable. The labor force participation rate and employment to population both rose on net in June and August. That's what you need to do, is get the labor force participation rate up. But like I said, a huge portion of the labor force can't participate because they've had a baby, and we don't help them when they have a baby. We're like, well, tough luck. It's really insane. The private sector job openings is measured by labor turnover survey. National wage growth continue to be rapid and broad basis is where the Fed really freaks out. Now, of course, that's true for companies too, right? If your labor costs go up, here's the problem with labor costs going up. When your labor costs go up, if material costs go up, like oil, right, it comes back down. At a certain point, it comes back down. Goes up 20%, goes back down 20%. All right, and your costs normalize. But if your labor costs go up 20%, they don't come back down. People do not take kindly to pay cuts. So once you have to raise labor rates, then you are embedding the inflation caused by those labor rates permanently. They're not going to go away. And the only way they then go away down the road is exactly where are we at then? Then it becomes an efficiency issue, right? Then the employers are saying the same thing that the automobile drivers are saying to OPEC. They're saying, at that price, I will replace you with a robot. Now you've crossed a threshold where I no longer want you at all. Okay, I was happy to pay you, and this is the argument that the conservatives will use to tell you why you shouldn't ask for a high minimum wage. It's like at McDonald's, right? For $7.25 an hour, I am happy to have 8 people at the checkout counter, right? I'm happy to have people taking your order and punching things into a key bed. But you know what? At $15 an hour, put in your own goddamn order on the kiosk, and there will be nobody standing at the counter and just cooks in the back handing you bags. And that's what McDonald's has changed into. And believe me, as soon as they can get rid of the cooks, they'll get rid of the cooks, and they'll just walk up to a robot and they'll throw hamburgers at you. You know, I mean, they can't wait. Oh, which, by the way, I must say that when Watson came out like 5 years ago, I predicted that this would happen. I predicted that we now have systems that are smart enough to be able to take your order. You know, and it's not as I actually thought it would be through I thought they'd be able to do it at the drive-in too, but they can't do that yet. But they did eliminate already all the people. I said all those ordering positions are going to be gone. There's no reason that you need these people anymore with what's available now technologically, and that's exactly where we are now. So now you go into a McDonald's and you punch your information in a machine, and which I don't know why they didn't do sooner, but whatever. And if you have the app, apparently, I don't have the app, but if you have the app, because I only go to McDonald's like once every few months, but if you have the app, apparently it would know your favorite order and you just go bip, and you're in. That's cool. I think that's very cool, because I don't think, well, when I go to McDonald's, I want the same thing I had last 3 months ago, because it's, you know, what I've decided is my favorite stuff there. So I think a lot of people like that, and I think all restaurants should have that. I think you should always be able to do this, because you know, you go to certain places, you want certain things, right? That's why you're there. So if I can just go bip with 2 buttons and go, oh, that's yes, I want to order my usual thing or make this modification, and bang. It should be convenient for the consumer too, not just for the McDonald's. And I think it's hysterical how now we stand in line at a kiosk at McDonald's, waiting to push the buttons, waiting to punch in our numbers. And by the way, it's a COVID disaster, right? Because everybody's touching the screen. You know, 100 people touching the screen, and they don't seem to care at all. I think that's hysterical. But so you stand at McDonald's and you come up to the thing, and now you're like standing in line. Instead of waiting to talk to the cash register girl, you stand in line waiting to put in your own goddamn order. But there you go, though. That's the thing. They made it so simple. They made it because for many years, McDonald's had to deal with like people who were not that bright making minimum wage at these jobs where they punch in the thing. So they made the machine ordering so simple that anybody could do it. And then they go, hey, wait a minute, our customers could do this. And the customers don't mind, because you do it better yourself than the people who you would read the order to, who would screw it up. Like now you get exactly what you want. And by the way, that's where McDonald's want me back, because now I can order what is it, a quarter pounder? Now I can order a quarter pounder with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise. And if you used to try to do that with the people, they would have a heart attack. Oh, and I can get no salt on my fries. That's another great thing. That was also very, very haphazard whether it would actually happen. Now it seems to work. So I can say fries, no salt, quarter pounder, lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise, and it comes out the way I want it. I'm having it my way at McDonald's. So that's great. But what does that mean? That means that you've eliminated 20, 30,000 jobs at McDonald's, probably more than that. I mean, how many McDonald's? There's got to be thousands. There's got to be 10,000 McDonald's. So probably 50,000 jobs at McDonald's you've eliminated. So yeah, wages rise and they adjust. But you know what? It's if you have time to adjust, and it's not as rapid, so it becomes disconcerting. But if there's time to adjust, it's not a bad thing that when you replace people. Like my father's first job, he was an actuary at an insurance company, and they used to have literally rooms filled with people, you know, with the old style calculators, the ones that you punch numbers in, and then you would pull like the lever, and it would manually calculate things like I don't even know how it worked, but the old, you know, those old machines that were run by by your own efforts, that you would basically punch in the numbers and then it would be calculated because you pulled the lever and it would somehow tabulate what the totals. And there were rooms full of these people running calculations all day long. Well, of course, they're all gone now, right? And those were good, nice jobs. That was a respectable job to be an actuary and work in these insurance departments. And there was millions of people did that. I mean, you know, any big company had a room full of guys like that. It's okay to change. It's okay for technology to evolve. It's okay for automation to wipe out an entire kind of job. The problem is, of course, it's very disruptive when it happens, and it takes a while for those people to filter back into other jobs. But right now, having 10 million open jobs, hardly a hiccup. We have so many unfilled jobs that there's not many things could replace a machine where people are saying, wow, that's great. Now we have these people available to work in other stuff. So we're in a beneficial cycle, and this is where the Fed's wrong, because we're in a beneficial cycle where wages are rising and the average job just pays more money, but there's less workers doing it. It'll all work out if they give it a chance, but instead the Fed would rather crash the economy and stop it from happening because they don't want rising wages to be embedded. You know, and why? It's because look at the banks. They don't want all their tellers making $40 an hour. Okay, and you can't, and that's the problem. You can't, it's hard. I mean, they already have with ATMs, right? You can't get rid of all the bank tellers. They got rid of most of the bank tellers. Remember, you used to go to a bank and they were like 20 windows. You know, you go to a big bank in a city and there'd be like window after window after window after window with people in it and stuff. And there'd be managers and people supervising and blah, blah, blah. And now you go to a bank, it's like 3 people in the whole bank. Because most of the time there's like a couple of ATMs and 3 people, because basically you don't need them. There's not that much stuff you need to do with the actual bankers. But it used to be everything. It used to be every dollar came in and out would go through the tellers and be dealt with that way. Again, big changes, right? And I remember that when Citibank had the first ATMs, so the first ones I was aware of, and it was great. They didn't charge a fee back then, but that was when that was probably late 70s when they began to get rid of their tellers slowly but surely over time. Got rid of millions of jobs, but it all worked out, sort of. Anyway, so wage growth, hourly earnings rose 5.2% in 12 months. Now that's horrifying. You have 10% inflation, but you have 5.2% wage growth. Employment cost index hourly compensation, which also includes, was 5.5%, blah, 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 blah. See, 2.4 percentage points faster than the year earlier pace. So we've had 2 years of like 10% inflation, and we've had in 20%. So with 20% inflation, there's been 7% wage growth. And the Fed wants to put a stop to that. That's like their primary mission right now, is to stop the wage growth. Consumer price inflation, PCE price inflation was 6% over 12 months. Obviously, we know that's total bullshit versus real prices. And excludes, well, which excludes changes in consumer energy prices and many consumer food prices. What a joke, right? It's 4.6%. The trim mean measure of PCE inflation, Federal Reserve, was 4.4. Blah blah blah. Here you go. The CPI 8.3, and that's also still bullshit, undercounted. Core CPI 6.3. Survey-based measures of short-run inflation, blah blah blah. Like college is completely unaffordable now. It's insane. Available spending measure indicators, including the August retail report, suggest PCE was on track to post a modest gain. Housing market data, rents are out of control too. That's another thing. Sharp contraction, business fixed investment appear to be rising at a tepid pace. Real goods exports stepped up in June, then rose further in July. Led by increase of export of industrial supplies. Real goods imports stepped down, so we're importing less, and then fell sharply in July. Decline in consumer goods imports, exports, and imports of services continue to be held back by an incomplete recovery of international travel. Nominal U.S. international trade. Exports contributed positively to GDP growth, and of course, a lot of this is our natural gas and gasoline going out of the country. Data pointed to weak foreign growth. And of course, there's a war going on, which is damping everything down. China's in a crisis. Japan's in a crisis. It's messy out there. It really is. In China, recent indicators suggest only a partial rebound from severe COVID related, and Shanghai closed up this weekend. Very bad. 25 million people live in Shanghai, taken off the market. Weaker growth in China and the broader economy, export, blah, 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 consumer price inflation, many foreign countries reflecting past with inflation persistently high. Central banks continued to tighten monetary policy. So everybody's in the same boat. And the worst thing is that if you don't keep up with the Fed, you're screwed because your currency will lose value drastically to the Fed, and which is illustrated if we do that. Well, it sure as shit's illustrated here, isn't it? Look at this. Holy crap. This is what happens to you if you don't keep up with the Fed. Your currency tanks and our dollar gets stronger. That's what happens. Look at poor Canada. Holy shit. Wow. Wow, what a bad couple of months it's been for Canada. These are what, weeks? These are weeks. Wow. Australia. Oh. New Zealand, it all fell apart for these guys, right? Euro's just been stepping down, 97.5. They're trying to save it here. Japan can't figure out what to do. Oh, that's so crazy. Wow. Look at England, they're all over the place too. Wow, Canada, what happened to you guys? Whew. Okay, over the intervening period, Treasury yields, blah, 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 credit remained widely available. We talked about that the other day. Increase. I see people can get credit. Nobody's having trouble borrowing, actually. But people are borrowing a lot. That's what's scary, is people are borrowing a lot. They're to some extent, we're back to that thing where people use their homes as piggy banks to get through rough economic times. But then if the homes, see, that's where the trap comes, because if you start leveraging up your homes and the homeowners have less equity in their homes, and then the home prices decline, then the homes go underwater, then the banks are holding mortgages that are underwater, and even if they foreclose on it, they're not going to recover all their money, so on and so forth. That can lead to a really bad situation where banks start, collapsing. They're not as leveraged as they were. We have controls in place. It shouldn't be that bad this time, but the danger is there, and the Fed does not want that to happen at all. I mean, we almost collapsed the world economy in 2008. We came very close to a total economic meltdown, and it would be very bad if we go that way again. That would be annoying. Since the July meeting, economic concerns, high inflations, treasury yields increased significantly, and treasury yields are much more up. They were 3% then, they're 4% now, so just under 4%. Equity prices decreased slightly on net as substantial early gains from investors improved perceptions about the outlook. Here's what I want to read. Second quarter earnings are more than offset by later losses arising from expectations that the committee would fall. So in other words, second quarter earnings were offset by losses arising, they're talking about losses in stock price, arising from expectation that the committee would follow a more restrictive policy and raise rates faster. 1 month option implied volatility. The VIX increased somewhat on net. Now let's look at the VIX. So what are they saying? Because here we are. Here's the VIX. Here's the days. So here we are on September 20th, and they're talking about the VIX rising, and look where we are now. Got much more volatile. So from these guys in September, I can tell, where's the 20th? 16, 19, 20, here we go. This is the 20th. So from September 20th, we were at 26, now we're at 32. That's up 20%. So we're 20% more volatile now than when they were making this statement. The VIX increased somewhat, remained elevated by historic norms, partially reflecting investor uncertainty and the risks of higher inflation, and expected a more restrictive policy stance. So it's all this has gotten worse. Corporate bond spreads narrowed slightly, remained roughly at midpoints. Policy rates and bond spreads, yields on corporate bonds rose significantly. Municipal bond spread, treasury yields widened. Conditions in short-term funding markets remain stable. Interest rates passed through. Secured overnight funds, soft relative block configuration. Relatively low treasury bill supply combined with strong investor demand for short-dated instruments amid uncertainty about the path of policy rate, consistent with continued softness and repurchase agreements, daily take-up, spreads on lower rated short-term paper change little, bank deposit rates continue. I'm just looking to see if they care. They don't seem to care about any of these things happening. Sovereign yields in most AFEs rose notably over the intervening period as central banks raised their rates, communicated tighter stances. Yields on Japanese government securities ended little change. The Bank of Japan, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. The dollar appreciated further against most major currencies, reaching multi-decade highs against the euro, the British pound, and the Japanese yen. The dollar strength largely reflected increasing investor concerns about global outlook, widening rates between the US and Japan. Because Japan is still like practically zero. Growth concerns also weighed on foreign equity prices, which declined moderately. Outflows from the funds, emerging markets, modest pace, credit spreads, emerging markets narrowed, blah, blah, blah. Domestic credit borrowing costs continue to rise. Yields on corporate bonds increased. Bank interest rates, they don't care about this. They care about whether it's liquid. Among small business borrowed on the share firms facing higher borrowing costs continue to climb. Municipal bond yields increased. Borrowing costs for residential mortgage loans increased and reached their highest level since 2008. Interest rates on credit cards moved higher. Fed funds, well, that's how they're designed. Auto loans read, okay. Credit remained generally, here's what they care about. Credit remained generally available, but high borrowing costs appear to reduce the demand for credit, which of course means it's more available, resulting in lower financing volumes, issuance of non-financial corporate bonds, blah, blah, blah. Gross institutional loans issuance increased modestly. Equity, see, to them, this means that they're not killing anything. If people can still borrow, then we're liquid, and if we're liquid, the Fed's not worried, and they'll keep doing what they're doing. Banks tightened credit standard for the first time in 2 years, but the loans on bank balance sheets expanded at a strong pace. So again, they think they're fine. The Fed thinks everything's fine because the banks are willing to loan out money. Thing is, the banks are excited to loan out money because they want to loan it out at these high rates. This is a great time for the banks. They're lending money out at these huge prices. People are paying a fortune in interest that they haven't been paying for decades. So of course they're motivated to write paper. So this is what they're going to watch. Credit availability to small business tightens somewhat. This is where they get a warning sign. The share of small firms reporting it's more difficult to continue an upward trend, but remain lower. This is it, but remain lower than historical average. That's got to go away before we're going to be in the clear. Credit, the residential mortgage market remained available for high score borrowers. Low score borrowers continue to ease through July, but modestly tight. Blah, blah, blah. Volumes of purchasing plunged in July amid rising rates. They're destroying that market too. The mortgage market is almost dead. Consumer credits remained available to most households, but about half the respondents in the Bank of New York survey, blah, 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 indicated it was harder to obtain credit than it was a year earlier, and they expect it to become even harder. The credit quality of non-financials remains strong. Low default rates for corporate bonds, volume of, this is what they think everything's fine as long as people can borrow money. The volume of rating downgrades and leveraged loans continue to exceed that of upgrades. Delinquency rates remained at low levels. That's another huge one for them. However, banks increased loan loss provisions somewhat during the quarter. Delinquency rates on CRE loans. By the way, the banks increased their loan loss provisions because it's embarrassing how much money they're making, and when they set aside money for loan loss provisions, it's a way of them controlling their profits. So in other words, the bank makes, JP Morgan makes $30 billion and they set $5 billion aside for loan loss provisions. They still make $25 billion, but now they've got $5 billion of untaxed, undeclared cash, not undeclared, but not noticeable cash on their books. So if they ever have a bad quarter, what they do is they reduce their loan loss provisions and take that money back as profit. So it's a way of putting off profits. It's a really nice, tricky thing. Banks and insurance companies get to do this. It's really fun. They get to manage their taxes that way, and also manage their earnings, because if they make too much money, rather than saying we made 30% more than last quarter, they say, oh, we made 15% more than last quarter, and they take 15% of their earnings and they put it into loan loss provisions, so they can tap that anytime they want. Delinquency rates on CRE loans also submitted to CMBS remained unchanged. Delinquency rates on small business loans stayed quite low after edging up. Credit quality remained strong. Household credit stayed broadly solid, but continued to worsen for some types of credit with low credit scores. We don't care about them. Mortgage delinquencies trended down. See, don't forget, the Fed is the banks. So mortgage delinquencies trended down in recent months, which is good for them. Share of mortgages in foreclosure remained low. By contrast, credit card and auto credit delinquency rates rose, particularly among subprime to subprime auto loan delinquency, rebounding sharply, slightly above their historical averages. It's going to take a lot for these guys to give up on their stance. This does not look like they're going to be changing their mind at all. The projection for the economy was weaker. However, the staff's estimate potential output now, as we know, this is thrown out the window though. See, now we've got much stronger economic activity than they thought at the time. Lower trajectory expected through the year. This is all wrong. So they may even be thinking they should tighten more as this is going. As a result of the staff's estimate, the output gap was revised considerably. Staff projections still had the output gap closing. The output potential at the end of 2025. Likewise, unemployment was expected to rise more slowly in July, below the staff's estimate. 12-month basis, PCE inflation was 5.1. Core inflation was expected to be 4.3. Core inflation expected to be 2.1 in 2025. This is nonsense. Price inflation 2 is like making up numbers. The staff continued to judge the risk baseline projection was skewed to the downside. In addition to the war in Ukraine, weak connectivity abroad, ongoing bottlenecks, these are getting much better. The possibility that a persistent reduction in inflation would require blah, 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 blah. The staff viewed the risks of inflation as skewed to the upside on the grounds of supply conditions might not improve as much as they expected. Energy prices might rise sharply again. They did, but then they came back down. The staff also pointed to the possibility wage increases could put a greater than expected amount of upward pressure on price inflation. And inflation expectations could become unanchored given the large rise in inflation over the past year and the upside risks of the inflation forecast. Woo. Appropriate, the discussion of current conditions. Recent indicators, modest growth, spending, production, job gains, robust. Recognize Russia's war again. The war and related events creating additional pressure on inflation, weighing global economic activity. Against this background, inflation risk with regards to the outlook. Participants noted the recent data. Participants observed recent indicators, consumer spending and business investment, just a modest increases in those categories. To revise down. See, this is a problem. This is going to keep these guys raising rates a lot because this is not happening. They're not impacting the GDP. They're not impacting the jobs. They're not impacting the GDP. The current GDP could understate the strength. Well, there you go. Somebody smart. Several participants noted continued strength in the labor market, and the data on GDP raised the possibility that the current GDP data could understate the strength in economic activities here. Wow, they got that right. Very good. Good several participants. Participants generally anticipate the U.S. economy will grow below trend pace in the coming few years. The labor market became less tight. Monetary policy assumed a restrictive stance. Participants noted that below trend GDP growth would reduce inflationary pressures. See, they're just doing it wrong. I'm telling you, it's if they let the economy grow and they helped people into the labor force, it would solve the problem. The supply of labor would put a cap on the wage increases and allow productivity to increase faster than you produce more goods, and therefore the goods are no longer expensive because you have the goods available to produce, and you do that by filling the jobs. Almost 10% of our labor force is missing. That's what you have to do. You have to fix that problem. They nowhere they discuss this problem. Spending, basically what they're saying is that despite their efforts, the economy is strong, spending is strong, labor demand is strong, and their answer is to say maybe we're doing this wrong. No, of course not. Their answer is to say let's just do it more then. This is not good. You're gonna be at serious odds. And also the key to the whole thing is once you force the government to start borrowing money at 4%, where the frick is that going to come from? What kind of disaster is that going to be? And they're heading us right into it. Participants discuss the perceived change in supply conditions. Many participants rely on their business context. There's a relief in supply bottlenecks, such as declines in shipping costs, while several participants saw improved supply. Bottlenecks likely to continue a while longer, blah, 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 labor shortages, yeah, see that? Constraints on production when taking the form of labor shortages. This is what you have to fix, and the solution to labor shortages is not to destroy the production. It's not to destroy the demand so that you don't need the laborers anymore. That's insane. These people are insane. It's tight, low unemployment, elevated rates, quit rates, low pace of layoffs, robust unemployment gains, nominal wage growth. Employers facing particularly acute labor shortages are associated with professional occupation, service industry, skilled trades, smaller firms. Again, this is why my housewife thing is where we're at, because they're educated people sitting at home because they're forced to, because there's nowhere else to put their children, that it's not economically viable to go back to work. Some participants noted development consistent with the labor market moving towards balance, lower job turnover, moderation, blah, blah, blah. However, several assessed that the scope for further improvement in labor was likely limited. See, the scope for further improvement in labor force participation is likely limited because nobody thinks outside the box. And of course, we have a lot of retirements, and it's an ongoing problem. If they don't do something about it, it's not going to go away because all the boomers are retiring. Participants anticipated that supply and demand imbalances. Well, I guess you can solve that by taking away Social Security, and then nobody can retire until they die. Participants anticipated that supply and demand imbalances in the labor market would gradually diminish the unemployment rate. would likely rise somewhat, importantly reflecting judged that softening labor market would need to be upward pressures on wages and prices. See, softening in the labor market would be needed to ease upward pressures on wages and prices. That is not true. You increase the supply of labor, and there are ways to do that. Participants expect, and again, immigration and childcare, very easy ways to fix this problem. Participants expected the transition towards softer labor be increase the employment rate. Several commented that considered likely transition would occur primarily through reduced vacancy, slower job creation. In light of challenges in hiring, businesses might be less willing to reduce their staffing levels. True, this also makes it harder for them to force a recession, because businesses, if you have employees and we slow down a little bit, you don't want to let go of the employees, because God forbid you don't get them back, and then you're back to this whole hassle you just went through all summer trying to find people. So the businesses are not really keen on what the Fed is doing. Future path of the unemployment rate commented on unemployment rate could rise considerably more than the staff forecast. Inflation unacceptably high, well over their goal of well over their completely unrealistic goal of 2%. Blah blah blah. Price pressures remain. Blah blah blah. Energy prices declined in recent months. Blah blah blah. Blah blah blah. Oh my God, how boring. Inflation pressures gradually recede in coming years. Various factors, including the committee's tightening of policy stance, gradually easing supply and demand imbalances, and labor and product markets, and likelihood that weaker consumer demand would result. And again, see, they're aiming to crash the economy to fix their problems, and that's the stupidest possible thing you can do. You have momentum going and a strong economy that's growing, and you need to grow the economy so that we can afford to pay off our debt, but instead they're going to crash the economy. The debt's not going to go away. They'll just crash the economy. Really pissed me off. The uncertainty associated with their economic outlooks is very high, and blah, 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 and their inflation outlook to the outside. Labor tensions, energy price increases, further disruptions, larger than expected pass-through of wages into price increases. Here's what they worry about: wages. So worried about wages. If they materialize, could compound the challenging inflation. Number of participants commented wage price spiral had not yet developed, but cited its possible emergence as a risk. So they're saying we aren't even into the thing where wages start pushing prices. That's a whole nother round of inflation. And it's very possible that we could have massive inflation for years to come. And they're not going to fix it by raising rates. That's not going to change it. Participants broadly judged that the real GDP growth was weighted to the downside. And again, they're dead wrong, right? It went up. The global headwinds included heightened risk in Europe, slowdown in China, ongoing activity, what they should worry about in China is China stopping this COVID policy after Xi is reelected or reappointed or whatever it is they call it next week. He may then say, well, screw you, it's my last term now. I don't care what you say. Right now, it would be political suicide for him because a lot of people would like his job. And so he can't now say he was wrong about COVID and go to a COVID tolerant policy. But next week, he can announce at the Congress after they reappoint him and say, okay, you know what? From now on, we're gonna allow a certain amount of COVID in the country, and we're gonna be less likely to shut things down. And all of a sudden, China's GDP is gonna go boom and start exploding, and everything these people are thinking it's gonna happen is wrong. That's how easy it is. In their consideration, appropriate stance of monetary policy, participants continue. The labor market is very tight. Wow, this is like a total repeat of everything we just said. Oh my God, what a lot of words. In light of the broad-based, unacceptably high level. Okay, in light of the broad-based and unacceptably, that's a very important word, unacceptably high level inflation, intermediate news of higher than expected inflation, upside risks to the inflation outlook, participants remarked that purposely moving to a restrictive policy stance in the near term was consistent with risk management considerations. Many participants emphasized that the cost of taking too little action to bring inflation down outweighed the cost of taking too much action. That's where their head is at. Several participants underline the need to maintain a restrictive stance for as long as necessary. and a couple of these participants stressing that historical experience demonstrate. And by the way, again, I've talked about this. I remember the late 70s, early 80s. Inflation was out of control. It was 10% a year, and this went on for years, not a little bit of time. It was like 5 years at least that inflation was around 10% or so. And we live with it. The world did not blow up. In fact, we were actually better off then than we were before that when we had a recession in the 70s. After the recession, we came out and we had this hyperinflation period where prices just constantly went up. And we were like, okay, prices constantly go up and we get a raise every year. And then it equalizes. Again, it equalizes eventually. But you know what? When it equalizes, your stock prices are doubled. Everything you owned is doubled. Your best investment to have at the time like that is to be in the market. Blah, blah, blah. A few participants notice heightened by the fact of the committee's actions, blah, blah, blah. See, the thing is that they think this is going to fix it, but it's not. And again, if it wasn't, and if we weren't $32 trillion in debt, it wouldn't matter, but we are, and they're assessing us with a $1 trillion a year tax by raising the rates like this, and that's insane. So they're fighting inflation by taxing us $1 trillion a year. That is not a good idea. And then the committee action, blah, blah, blah. Here's their letter and what they talked about. And it was unanimous, though. Nobody voted against it. You know, so that's where we are, and there's nothing in here that indicates that they would do less than 75 at the next meeting, and the GDP is stronger, unemployment is still high, inflation is still high. There's no reason at all they aren't going to keep hiking the rates from these minutes. But you know what? The market is not really being damaged by this because there's also nothing worse than they've already said. They have already said verbally over and over and over again, they're going to keep raising rates and keep raising rates and keep raising rates. All right, so that's where we are, guys. It's all about earnings now. This is now out of the Fed's control anyway. The market is anyways. They're going to keep raising rates. There's really nothing worse they can do. They're already telling you they're doing the worst possible thing. So now we just have to wait and see how the earnings look and deal with that. All right, let's see. GNRC, I've looked at that several times as a stock. I put it on my list. Selling 180 puts. I'm thinking of rolling down to the 140s and buying the 140. I would stick with them. Yeah, I think GNRC is a long-term holding stock. So yes, I would stick with it. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just an opportunity to take a bigger position when it goes down. How are they doing now? What's this? GNRC. Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends where you came in. I put on my list 124, 180 puts, and it's at 148. That's unfortunate. Yeah, they took a big dip. I don't know why they took such a dip. But yeah, we'll watch earnings closely and remind me when they have earnings. I haven't heard CLF mentioned lately. They're not out of favor, are they? No, I like them. I don't think they've been that cheap. I think that's what it is. They didn't have a big dip. Oh, well, they are pretty cheap. Now, remind me in chat. I would be very happy to add them to a portfolio. I didn't realize they were back at 15. Got to see why, but you know, again, it's price fluctuations wreak havoc on these companies, but they get over it eventually. So what do you think about investment grade corporate bonds like LQD and treasuries, TLT? No. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know where this is going to end, and it's not, to me, it's like I don't want to bet on the bonds. I mean, I like to bet on TLT when it was at 130. I'm happy to short them. They're not at 130 now. They're at like close to 100, aren't they? TLT. Yeah, they're at 100. So, you know, our old rule of thumb was short TLT at 130 before the insanity of 0% inflation. I'm sorry, 0% interest rates. But back in the day when life used to be rational, 130 was our shorting line on TLT, and we would always short it when it went over 130, and it would eventually come back to 120. We'd make our money that way. This is too crazy. I mean, yeah, the Fed is telling you they're going to keep raising rates. It's going to go lower. So I'm not sure what you think you're doing with the corporate bonds. Like, why would you, and corporate bonds are a whole nother problem. You start having defaults on corporations and stuff, and the bond prices go nuts. I wouldn't be in either one of them. It's not my kind of thing. There's easier ways to make money, like buying CLF, although it might not look like it right now. Or, by the way, SPG. Holy cow! I got to tell you, Simon Property Group, they own the malls, right? So people have been worried about the malls, and I got to stop soon. But SPG, I got to tell you this thing. I was running the numbers again. You buy the stock for $94, but the price of these options going out when you're out in 2025, the 95 calls are $16. The stock is 94. The call is $16. Now, if you sell, if you buy the stock and sell these for 16, the 95 calls, and sell the $80 puts for 15, right? That's $31 off. 16 plus 15, right? 31. So 94, so you're paying 94.32 minus $16. No, 31 minus $31. You're paying $63.32 net. And what did I say we sold? The 95 puts, right? The 95 calls. Yeah, you're selling the 95 calls for $16. You're selling the $80 puts for $15. So you're netting into the stock for $63.32, and you get called away at 95 with a 50% gain. At 95, the price it is now with a 50% gain, you're going to collect the dividend, which is 7% while you wait. This is one of the best deals in the market. We just added to a portfolio the other day. We added to two portfolios the other day, the dividend portfolio and the long-term portfolio. This is a fantastic stock because of the volatility, because of people's uncertainty about it, and so on and so forth. But it's an incredibly good mall operator with very steady money. It's all long-term leases. It's not like they're going to suddenly be empty tomorrow. They went through this already in 2008. They know what they're doing. It is ridiculous that this stock is being treated this way. It really is. And they're upscale malls. They're not like the downscale malls. They're generally decent malls that are going to make money over in any kind of conditions. That's just a straight thing. You buy the stock, you sell the calls, you sell the puts. If you get assigned, you get assigned another batch at 80. So your average is 70. Your average would be like 73. And that's $20 off the current price. 20% below the current price is your worst case scenario. So if it stays flat or goes up at all, you're going to make 50%. And the worst case is you're going to buy it for 20% less than it is now. I mean, they're just giving money to you in this situation, plus the 7% dividend if you're buying the stock. Now, we did it in the long-term portfolio with a bull call spread instead, and we sold the puts, so we're fine about that too. But honestly, for why would you not want to make 7%? 7%, and it's not 7% because the dividend's the same. The dividend is like $7. So your dividend is really like 11 or 12% against the amount of cash you have to lay out in this thing. So cannot emphasize enough how good of a trade that one is. That's my favorite right now is Simon Property Group. It's like, if I had to pick one trade, it could be our trade of the year next year. If it stays down this low into November, which is only a month away, it's only a month till I have to figure out my trade of the year. So we're going to start that thing soon too. This could be it because I can't believe the way that you can do this. It's just ridiculous how cheap this is and what a value the stock is and how great the options are all at the same time. Incredible prices being paid for options, great stock, ridiculously undervalued. So that's my commercial for Simon Property Group. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate it. And we will do this again next week. All right. Take care, folks.